If you've been in this business for decades, how do you keep your career moving ahead? Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. This is Molly Stevens, and I am here with Andrea Nguyen. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Miss Stevens. How are you?
I am okay.
I'm giving you my sultry voice.
I know. I like your sultry voice. But so, Andrea, we've both been in this business for quite a while, decades, plus, times. I mean, one of the things I love about this podcast is we talk to people who come to cookbooks from all sorts of places, but we're often talking to people who are starting out. We talk to a lot of debut authors. And I'm just really curious to talk to people who've been in food writing, food media for a long time, and then pivot to a new direction.
Yeah. I think that if you've been in this business for a long time and there were certain patterns that you could rely upon. Okay, maybe you write a book and then you write newspaper articles, magazine articles, you have a blog, blah, blah, blah. You do social media, et cetera, and then you can make a living. If you were lucky, you could make a living.
Right.
Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Yeah, because, magazine articles, I still do some. I know you still do some. The rates have not changed.
The rates have not changed in 20 years. It's $1 words, my friend.
Yeah. I used to be able to write a number of articles a year and support my cookbook writing hobby.
Yeah.
Really. It's kind of what it felt like, it being a little bit glib about that. But
so then, when you get to this point in your life where, we're all going to be living longer and we want to continue doing the kind of work that gives us joy, how do we keep that moving? How do we keep the hustle going without feeling like we're just dog paddling?
Or that we're selling out or doing
Correct.
something we don't want to do, that there's no joy in it, there's no growth in it. So how do we find something? And the landscape keeps changing. The rates don't change, but the landscape changes.
And, the other thing, too, is this is sort of a joke, but it's not. I used to have these default plans.
Mm-hmm.
If my book writing career didn't work out, I would become a grocery bagger. I was very good at bagging groceries.
Oh, I've always wanted. Yeah, I talked about that a lot. Yes.
Now
I'm very
you don't
good at
need
it.
them.
No, you don't need them. They're all self-checkouts.
Career obsolescence, man.
The reason we're chit-chatting about this is because today we are talking to Betsy Andrews. Betsy is an award-winning journalist, travel writer, poet. You and I both worked with her when she was an editor at Saveur. She's edited our articles, our recipes. She's now a contributing editor at Food and Wine, 750 Daily, Imbibe. Her byline is
all over.
The girl hustles.
Yeah.
She's also written 3 books of poetry and won awards for her poetry as well. So she's got a lot of experience. And she's just co-authored her first cookbook.
And she's in her early 60s.
Yeah. So we got a lot to talk to Betsy about. So let's get to it. Well, Betsy, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we're excited to talk to you. And congratulations on Coastal. There's a lot of buzz around it.
Thanks so much. It's exciting.
We talked to a lot of debut cookbook authors who start their careers with the singular goal of writing a cookbook. But your story is a little bit different.
Yes.
You're an acclaimed poet. You're a travel writer, journalist. And now there's this pivot. And you've co-authored a celebrity-driven cookbook. So were you planning on this?
No, I wasn't. I never wanted to do a cookbook. I was a food journalist. I've been in food and drink since the beginning of the millennium. And when I stopped being a full-time editor, I was an editor at Saveur and I edited both of your stories. People would say to me, "Where's your book? Where's your book?" I would say, well, I have 3 books of poetry. And that really meant nothing in the food journalism world. But I just didn't have this compulsion to have something. If I was going to do something extracurricular, it was going to be poetry.
Right.
When I wasn't filing deadlines on food or drink or travel stories. But then this PR person who used to send me out to California every year to meet people asked me to go meet this guy. He wasn't the one paying for it. He didn't have any money, but a more wealthy client had paid to get me out there. But she asked me to go meet this chef, Scott Clark, who had a luncheonette in a caboose on the side of the Cabrillo Highway in Half Moon Bay. And I went and met him. He was an East Coast guy. He had gone through a bunch of Michelin-starred restaurants on the East Coast and in San Francisco. He had been chef de cuisine at Cezanne, and he burnt out. He had a 5-year-old he wasn't seeing. He was sick of working 80 hours a week and getting beat up in Michelin-starred restaurants, kitchens. We had a lot in common. We both loved the Central Coast of California, and we're both East Coasters, and we started talking about all the little places we loved along the Central Coast. And I said to him, wouldn't it be cool if we did a road trip story and you surf and we stop at all these great little eateries and we write about it, and it's this really aspirational story. I said, I have this perfect photographer, Cheyenne Ellis. She's a 4th-generation Californian and a 3rd-generation stunt woman.
Wow.
She was living in Half Moon Bay because her husband is a big wave surfer. He surfs Mavericks. And I had done a story with her in Ayacucho in the Peruvian Andes with potato farmers. And I knew how good her work was. So I asked her if she wanted to do this story with us. We pitched it to Eating Well magazine. They took it. And we had this amazing journey down the Central Coast. And, it's a magazine. They take 800 words, 5 recipes, and 10 photographs. And we had a ton of material. And we had such a good time working together that it just happened organically. I was like, let's make a book.
Let's keep working together.
Yeah, let's keep working together.
We hear from agents and publishers a lot, Betsy, that chef books just don't sell these days. I know that there was a bidding war for this project. How did that happen?
Well, I think this is a really different kind of chef's book. It's a travelogue, first of all. I mean, it's really a coffee table book because it's got all this just glorious
pages and pages of photographs.
Yeah, and not just food photographs. I mean, just all these environmentals of the Central Coast. And also, Scott's cooking is really approachable. I wouldn't call it easy cooking. Sometimes, you think you're going to make something for dinner and it's going to take you 2 weeks to ferment that one ingredient, I mean, it is like that, but it's really approachable food. It's really crave-worthy food. It's not fussy. It's just stuff you really want to eat. And so, we had a bidding war. Chronicle won that bidding war. This was perfect for them because it filled a niche for them. They're a California publisher. They've covered every other part of California and they hadn't covered the Central Coast.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Was it just because they had the highest bid, or was part of it also because it was Chronicle? They were just what you said, there's California publisher. They got the vision for it.
Yeah, it was both of those things. It's interesting because Cheyenne and Scott were really into Chronicle. They knew Chronicle because they're Bay Area. So they did really get it. What was interesting is that our agent is from Dystal in New York. But she also got it because at the moment that I sent her our initial letter asking her to be our agent, she had just come back from a family trip to Napa. So for her, it was this aspirational thing. It hit her exactly the way that we're hoping that it will, hit people outside of California. Like, oh, the dream, So she was coming from that perspective. And then Chronicle was coming from the perspective of knowing the state and then wanting to cover it thoroughly.
Yeah.
I love California. I've lived here for most of the 50 years that my family has been in America. When my mother got here to California from Vietnam, she said, I'm not going ever back to Vietnam for a whole number of reasons, one of them being the weather. So in this political climate, there's sometimes a lot of hate towards California from a lot of different parts of this nation. You made this book last year, goes to print. So right now we're in 2025, lots of stuff coming down the pipeline, lots of tensions. How does that aspirational aspect of selling a book like this figure into how you're going to pitch it now that the book's out?
The thing about the Central Coast is that it's small, it's California, but it's also small town America. There are a lot of farmers, fishermen, working people. That's something that's really important to Scott and something we talk a lot about in the book. So in that sense, the people have a sort of heartland vibe. It's not about the mansions of Montecito. It's about the people who produce the food. And a lot of that food is food that everybody around the country eats.
Yeah.
So I think it's approachable from that perspective. He's also a dad. I mean, first and foremost, he's a dad. It's a book about family as well. It's a book about being a single dad raising a kid, which is something that I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, it talks a lot about his community and the community of locals. And so in selling this book, I'm sure you had to say who's going to buy, who's the audience.
Yeah. And I also just want to add, actually, Andrea, and this is sort of about audience, the hatred towards California, I think is rhetoric from people in positions of political power. I do not necessarily think that is shared by the majority of Americans. I don't think the majority of Americans have the amount of vitriol in their hearts that our political leaders would like to think that they do.
Well, Betsy, I asked the question because you have been very politically engaged.
Yes.
And this matters to you.
Yes.
So I figure that this is something that weighs on you.
Absolutely. The word love, while I was ventriloquizing him for all these pages, actually
I want to talk about that.
Yeah, I had to go back and cut the word love out a lot when I went back and edited, because I was like, oh, we're just using the word love on every single page, because that is definitely what he comes with. Like, I really do want that to be centered, that it's just a book that's full of love for community and family. In terms of audience, I think there's a lot of different tentacles of that. There's parents who, are interested in their kids having interesting food and knowing something about cooking and maybe having some decision-making power, and just eating sort of cool things. It's for scratch cooks, who want to be able to make a bunch of building blocks that then they can cook other things from, and who are really interested in, fresh ingredients and, farmers market driven cooking.
And banging flavors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for people who want to get some techniques. I mean, I learned some techniques that I use all the time from Scott for this book. I mean, that really, really happened, and I'm a professional. It's also like for people who want something really cool looking on their coffee table.
No, I mean, it is certainly an aspirational book. And I think that most of the time for people who write cookbooks, you want people to use the recipes. But there is this other part of the publishing world. And I love the fact that we're discussing this, that this is meant to be aspirational. This is going to be selling in the boutiques of Malibu. And I know you don't like Montecito, but you know what? Shoot, they've got money.
I don't dislike them. They're just not the focus.
But I mean, I know exactly the kind of store that this would sell in. I see it. I see it in Hawaii. I see it in California, wherever there's water and surf.
Yep.
Some of these recipes have very large portion sizes for home cooks, like the mayonnaise, for example.
Well, the building blocks, especially.
The building blocks, yeah. And when you were working on the recipes, normally for me, I'd be like, trigger. What are we going to do with all that? Blah, blah, blah.
Right. Well, if you make that amount of mayonnaise, if you make all the recipes that have mayonnaise in them in the books,
right.
In the book, you're going to use that much mayonnaise. So the idea is, have this around.
Right.
I hadn't had to throw anything out. I used everything.
Yeah.
And there are some things that I make a lot and then I don't have them anymore, like the pickled onions or the oven dried tomatoes.
Right. The umami oil.
Yeah, I mean, those are just things that get used.
Yeah, it's because you do. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and it says right in the introduction in the front matter that it's scratch cooking of a higher order or a high order. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, because you're not afraid, or, I mean, you, Scott, it's all one, but to call for a hydrator, smoker, Cambros, fermenting weights, these types of things. But it's done in a way, it's aspirational, invitational. Come on, get this stuff out and let's make some food that kind of goes to the next level sort of thing.
Right. In a way, I'm really a good audience for this book. I didn't have a hydrator. I bought a $20 hydrator online. It's a little plastic thing. And you know what? It works really well. I mean, I had that experience over and over again where I was
Yeah.
acquiring gadgets that I now use and was so glad. So, if you're kind of interested in taking your cooking to like the next level, it's a good book to use.
Yeah. The minute you get the book, it's got this vibe. I mean, it's got this whole Central Coast vibe. I'm not from California. I've certainly been out there, haven't spent nearly as much time out there. Don't hate it at all. Love it, actually.
You can come visit.
I love to visit. But the vibe is so deliberate and loud and bright. What do you call the color? Is it coral? It's just...
Yeah, it's kind of a coral.
It's a neon and it goes throughout.
It's like the Caltrans worker's vest.
And it's embossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the book lies flat too. I know we're going to talk a little bit about design, but that is just, yes, it's a coffee table book, but the fact that it lies flat when you open it up, to me, it's like, yeah, it's a cook's book too.
Right.
And there's a certain retro element to it. A lot of photography and the organization of the 11 chapters around the idea of a road trip. It seems like each chapter was a story, and you've produced stories,
right,
and you've produced them masterfully. And so when Molly and I were going through it, we were really thinking about you bringing to bear all of your skills editorially and as a travel writer and a food writer, and it just comes through so clearly.
Thank you.
And that's not always the case in these kinds of books. What was the thought behind the organization?
We had taken a road trip.
Yeah.
And we were like, let's just continue on that theme.
But you didn't physically do that, right?
We had physically done it for the Eating Well story. And then we had a few more chapters to do. And we did do those experiences. I mean, my partner's family keeps a boat in Ventura. I sail out to the Channel Islands, with her and her uncle every year. And so we took Scott and Cheyenne along. And
you're a diver.
I'm a diver.
Wait, is that Captain Dan?
That's Captain Dan.
Okay, because that chapter, and I have to say the experience of reading this book, which I'm glad I've had some time with it, because it's not an experience of reading a normal cookbook. Because these chapter organization, you'll find drinks in most every chapter. You'll find desserts in most every chapter. So to find your way through it, you really have to sort of dive into these mini trips.
Right.
The sailing the Channel Islands, where you're making a sea urchin, cacio e pepe, and scallops and citron. I mean...
Yeah, we actually, Dan and I went diving. I got the urchins. He got the scallops because I don't have the strength to pry the scallops off the rocks under the water. Scott fished for the rockfish and the mackerel, and we made that food right there and then.
So then there's surfing, there's sailing, there's hunting, there's a picnic in the vineyard. They're all encapsulated.
So how did you bring all of, the decades of work that you've done in food and journalism to this particular project?
My life is a hustle. I always say that being a freelancer is like, I'm a shark. You just have to keep swimming. But once I left full-time editing, I did not want to go back. I went to lunch with a photographer friend of mine who wanted to do some stories with me. It was a Friday afternoon. We were sitting at Buvette in the West Village. I wasn't at a press lunch. I wasn't working. I wasn't reporting on the place. It was filled with interesting people, interesting artists, basically, on a Friday afternoon. And I thought to myself, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to desk editing. And I luckily haven't. But that has meant that I am constantly, working. I'm working on multiple stories at once. I have 10 to 12 stories that I know I'm on deadline for at any one time. And so to have something extra to do, like the cookbook, well, if I was going to have something extra, it was going to be writing poetry, because that's, my art. However, I fell so deeply in love with these people and with and I've always loved California so deeply that this concept just seemed like the right thing for me. It was completely organic. Luckily, with cookbooks, you get an advance. And that big chunk of money is really important to a person like me. It is very hard to get a chunk of money at one time. And those chunks of money like pay for things that I couldn't otherwise pay for. You know, it was the first time I was able to put away some money into, you know, my IRA, for instance, for years. So it's had, like, I didn't know actually it was going to have that effect, and it's had that effect. I can't talk very much about the second project I got because of that, because of the cookbook, this cookbook, and I think the skills that I brought to it, because I think like an editor, it was really seamless working with Chronicle on this. And so they offered me another project.
Because you turned in such a clean...
Because I turned in really clean copy. That is like of the utmost importance to me on any...
That's a dream, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't know until you're on both sides.
Yeah. And then also just, I understood the editing process. I mean, I could argue my points like a professional.
In the editing process.
In the editing process.
Back and forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And consistency really matters to me. And so then they offered me this project that was recipe developing for a celebrity. I can't talk about it because that celebrity hasn't yet to announce the book, but it was a 2-month project and it paid very, very well. And I was just like, thank goodness, you know? I followed my heart and it took me to a really good place. I don't think that's, you know, always the case. I got lucky. I got lucky this time.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it luck, but you said yes to something that, you know, you moved toward it.
Yeah, it like happened at the right time for me. I mean, it's like, you know, Andrea's saying, I've been in this career for a long time. It's exciting to have something new that I'm into. Now I'm talking to another chef about another book because I found his cooking so thrilling. It would be a really unique book. So possibly doing another one of these. But just to get back to sort of what I brought to bear to get the book done, I was an editor at Saveur for several years, and we did a lot of writing in the voice of chefs and other food professionals who were not writers and giving them the byline, interviewing them, and then mimicking their voice. So that was a skill I had honed really well before I got to this book. And then Scott, luckily, is very voicey.
Yeah, we get that.
And so that was fun. You know, it was fun to ventriloquize him for that long a period of time, those many pages, because he's just got a terrific voice.
So all the rad, cool, veg, dude, mega stoner, all that language, that's all Scott.
Yes.
Talking to you. Is he writing too, or is it all verbally communicated?
It's all verbal. In fact, he cooked on FaceTime and I wrote the recipes.
Right. So they're his recipes.
All his recipes, and I wrote them down. Towards the end of the book, he would send me, when we were getting closer to deadline and we didn't have as much time to do that over FaceTime, he would send me ingredients lists and then talk me through process. And then I did all of the testing and managed the cross-testing.
That's what you do.
Yep.
You're coming into cookbook production, cookbook creation at such a high level at this point in your career because of your experience having been an editor for so long. Because, you know, it's someone else doing this. The question would be like, so how'd you learn to write recipes? It's like, well, I've been editing recipes for a very long time.
Yes.
I've been editing head notes. I know how all that goes together.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not starting out from scratch.
Right. It took me a year to write the proposal.
Okay.
Because I had an incredibly high standard for us. The reason being, actually, I think that our agent, Stacy Glick, she did a real solid because she gave me proposals, which were frankly miserably written, but they were from bloggers who had 1 million followers. And they were for books that ended up on the New York Times books bestsellers list. And I thought, okay, we don't have those followers. Cheyenne sort of does because she's a photographer. But Scott has never cared about social media, and I am a journalist. I'm not an influencer. So we didn't have that, but we did have our excellence. We took a long time to make it really perfect, and I had a friend of mine who I had worked in magazines with format it, basically, like design it so that editors could look at it and see what it could be.
Was the design similar?
Not unlike it.
Okay. It's interesting hearing you say that you took a year, and I would like to know how long then you had to deliver the manuscript.
A year.
So Dad's Luncheonette, I've been there a couple of times. The menu's relatively small, but there are 130 recipes in here.
Mm-hmm.
Where does Scott pull all of these recipes from?
Well, he worked in a lot of restaurant kitchens. He worked at Vidalia in DC. He worked at Banu in San Francisco. He worked at Cezanne, where he was R&D chef for a while too. I mean, so many of the recipes in this book come from like ideas and skills and concepts he came up with at other restaurants that he worked at. And, you know, Dad's has afforded him a healthy lifestyle and some freedom. And he's really creative within those constraints. But there's a lot he can't do at Dad's.
Because of what it is.
Yeah. It's a lunch joint. So he makes really cool things there. And the Dad's chapter is all the stuff he makes there. But then he has all these more elevated or more elaborate things for different occasions than just lunch, you know?
Right. Fish sticks for the kid.
Yeah, he's got a million ideas.
Going back to the aspirational aspect of this book, the design-wise was very, very interesting. Y'all like break some rules in cookbook design, I have to tell you.
Oh, see, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, we totally do. We totally do, my friend. For example, like as a reader, you're going through a book and the recipes, you're expecting certain things to be in certain places. And in Coastal, the recipe title moves around and it comes in different font sizes.
Yes.
The head notes move around and you're like, where are they? What led to that kind of design decision?
Yeah, that was the designer. I mean, it frankly threw me a little bit, you know, when I first saw it. But I warmed to it because it feels really dynamic.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Sometimes I had trouble with the continueds, actually, with the turns.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the way design turned out. And like in the end, I just think it's just all more part of the journey. It adds to the sort of coffee table aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah, like there's a point where every time an E is next to the letter A, the E is connected to the A. And that's like a very intentional, special design. I started looking for them.
Yeah. No, but it does lead to the sort of immersive experience of being with the book. You're sort of on this trip along with it. And then in terms of working with Chronicle, was there house style, like the decision to include metric or include the time required to make each recipe? Was that Chronicle?
Well, one was Chronicle, the other one was us. So the metrics is for Chronicle because they're going to sell the book in England.
Got it.
And I had to do that with the second project I did with them too. It's a pain in the ass. Oh my God. It's such a pain in the ass. And actually, you know, they have spreadsheets, a guide to their conversions, and their conversions are different than, say, King Arthur's conversions.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Like everybody's a little bit different. So it's at times confusing, but we got through it. The reason I was really set on having times in this book is that I did not want to mislead readers. I wanted them to see those because some of those times it's overnight. You know, you want people to know it's going to take hours.
Right.
I just think we would have been remiss without them. And at one point they wanted to cut them out. And I was like, we really need those.
Was there a lot of back and forth with Scott or some back and forth in terms of, like, I'm thinking about the cured salmon roe, and you can buy salmon roe or you can cure it yourself. Was that something you're like, oh, can we give a substitution? Or broccoli that gets blanched in seawater? Can we tell people how to do it with just salt?
Was that you, Betsy?
So the salmon roe, I mean, Scott was just going on what he does. He's a fisherman and he cures his own salmon roe. And I'm like, Scott, the vast majority of salmon roe you buy out there, it's going to be Cora. It's already cured.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay. You know, he's living in a very chefy sort of backwoodsman kind of space. So we put them both in there. Because it's in the, you know, it's sort of in this ethos of you can fish, you can forage, you can hunt. Yeah, you can also just go to the grocery store.
Right.
The broccoli is actually a recipe from Jean's father. This is something we've always done on the boat.
Amazing.
However, it never tasted like that until Scott made it, because Scott turns it basically into a banchan. I mean, Jean's dad would just kind of basically overcook broccoli. in a bucket of seawater,
Right.
on the boat. And Scott made this really elegant, lovely, very simple recipe. And most people, in this country don't live near the ocean. So you just make it pasta water, basically.
Right. It's a recipe that you've been making on the boat with Jean's dad, and then Scott comes along and turns it into something that's book worthy.
Yes.
And then how do we put this in the book?
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of listeners who do collaborative projects or work with chefs, there is often a tension with a chef, and the chef does it this way. And that's why it's important to know who your audience is, obviously. And then you're like, yeah, but nobody can get fresh salmon roe. And you don't want to gut the book by making everything stuff you can buy at Wegmans or whatever. But how that back and forth works, it's a reality of a project like this, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, Scott really only cooks with Meyer lemons. And, why not? They're amazing lemons.
Yeah, if you can get them.
They're all over the Central Coast, you guys. So that's people's lemons in their backyards.
That's right.
But their acidity is different. So it's a different ingredient.
Right. It is a different ingredient. But, you get close with regular lemons. And, you could say half lemon, half mandarin, orange or something like that. We didn't want to get that fussy. If you get the Meyer lemons, get the Meyer lemons. If not, the lemon juice is okay.
Mm-hmm.
We were hoping for that vibe throughout.
Yeah, I noticed there's something in the vineyard that you make with wine grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Thick-skinned wine grapes. And, I'm sitting here in little old Vermont, and I'm not... Actually, there are wines up here now,
Yes,
as you know,
there
Betsy.
are.
Yes, I'll take that back. But anyway, it's February. I'm not getting any thick-skinned wine grapes this month. So, but you do say in that recipe, taste it, add a little more or a little less, whatever, sugar, acid to balance it out. So you sort of don't offer a substitute, which is cool, but then say you've got to tweak, you might have to tweak the flavor because you're using something else.
Yeah. We have these rules of the road in the beginning. And he says, taste, taste, taste. Like tasting is the most important thing. No one is ever going to make the dish the way the chef does. That just doesn't happen. You make the dish the way you make it. It is your version of the chef's dish. That is always the case.
Well, I think that as writers, we all know that as soon as a recipe is used by someone else, it's no longer yours. And you leave your ego in the kitchen, your kitchen.
Right.
And leave it to someone else's interpretation. So marketing this book is interesting. Regarding the vineyard chapter, the winery's label in the bottle is very prominent in one of the photos. And I wanted to know, if, that was intentional on your part. People have product placement kind of situations. But do you think about how these 11 chapters allow you to market the book to ever many businesses that are involved in each one of the chapter?
No, we didn't think about that at all. I mean, I knew the Do Nights because I had done some reporting on them. I liked their wine. We wanted to do a vineyard chapter. I asked a few young, amazing winemakers on the Central Coast, and they said yes. We were walking their vineyard with them, drinking their wine, and that's why it's in the photograph.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the farms and the people that you decided to feature, I think there are 11 of them. They don't kind of match the chapters. The importance of including them in these stories, what was that conversation or how?
So some of those came out of the initial road trip we did for Eating Well. People we would visit and, adventures we were having. And some of those people were from that time. So Dee Harley, at the goat farm.
The goat farm, yeah.
Anthony Garbino, who used to be the owner of Julia's and now is not. The mushroom-driven restaurant in Pacific Grove. Spencer Marley, who is the seaweed forager. Neil Maloney, who is Morro Bay Oysters. All of those were from the story that we did. And that was all me being a magazine journalist.
Yeah. And did Scott accompany you, or did you accompany Scott on all those trips?
Yes. Scott and Cheyenne and I did all that together. And then we added some more people. We added the Dunites because we wanted to do a vineyard thing. We added Wally, the Kluger, and the Queen of Hearts, sport fishing boat, because he's a good friend of Scott's and Scott goes out fishing with him all the time. Santa Cruz Farmers Market, because Scott goes there with his kid. I mean, these were authentic.
Yeah. I don't know how you did all of this in 2 years.
So it took you 1 year to write the proposal, but as you're putting together the proposal, you're also putting together content for the book, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You know that you can't wait until after the ink is dry.
Yeah.
Right.
When you were writing in Scott's voice, ventriloquizing, I think, that's the word you use? It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great word. Did you get pushback? I mean, would Scott read it and say, close, not? No, he was just like, sounds great. Sounds like me.
Yeah. The only times that we both had a problem with it was the copy editor changed some words. Then we were like, no, Scott would never say that.
I think of you first as a poet, which I don't know. I mean, I know that's not your main work and you call it your art, but I think I read an interview with you where it said, I don't know, are they all book length poems? I know two of them are. Yeah.
Yes.
That they take you a year to write a poem, which is a year to write a book.
Yeah. It takes me like 7 years to write a book.
Yeah. Okay.
But it might be sort of condensed into, because I only write poetry on writing residency. It's the only place I need to be away from, because if I'm sitting at my desk at home, that's the food, drink, travel writing space. That's a journalism space. So, the amount of time I'm on residency is when I'm writing poetry. And then, so it may be about a year. Yeah.
How do you feel that those two work together or don't?
I think that poets make the best prose writers, We used to have poets write for us at Severe because it's just gorgeous. You think about every single word. You think about every piece of punctuation. When I'm writing, like journalism, it's rhythmic in my head. And sometimes that seems sort of almost silly because it's not the way people read magazine articles, but it is the way that I write, So it's just about really careful attention to language. I'm interested in reading head notes that both tell a story and also give you some good information. And I think it's possible to do both. There's another thing that I learned at Severe, which is we do these capsule stories. They were 100 words long. Those were these exquisite little gems where you're doing the entire narrative arc in 100 words. To me, that's the best kind of head note. Also, because it's not fiction, you're also giving facts and, direction for cooking and whatever. And you're just doing that all in this perfect little gem. So the head notes in this book are really important to me. Also, they were important to Scott because he has a million stories to tell.
Is he happy with the book?
Very.
Good.
Just to kind of wrap things up, what was one of the biggest things that you learned from this process, and what could you kind of advise to our listeners?
I sometimes forgot to set a timer. I have to go back and do things again. I would have to sometimes hunt for ingredients. So I wasn't always the most A-type planner. And I feel like people like you, Andrea, you got a whole setup, you've done a million books, you're probably incredibly organized. I am not the most organized person.
I mean, because you've done all this editing and writing, but the recipe development piece, my understanding, you haven't done as much of.
Right. And I did do that. And I would have to sometimes redo the recipe because I got the metrics wrong. And then I'd be like, well, wait a minute. Was it the metrics or was it was it cups that was right? Or was it the grams that was right? I don't know. I have to remake this now. There was some of because you're in the flow of cooking. I mean, I'm this generally an intuitive cook.
Yes.
Right.
If you're already a competent intuitive cook, you're just cooking along and you're like, oh shit, I was supposed to measure this. And
So that was the big learning thing. I remember years ago, working with Dana Bowen at Severe, and she would say to me, well, you brought measuring cups and measuring spoons with you on that trip, didn't you? And I'd be like, no. Was I supposed to do that? Yeah, that's you. I never did that. And I was always like, I don't know,
Yeah.
eyeballing things. Yeah, so I mean, it's good to work with a chef who's got his measurements, down. And then when I was recipe developing, I really just had to would do things multiple times to make sure, because I sometimes screwed it up.
And you had a big list of recipe testers, cross testers I saw in the acknowledgments.
I did. And that too is something Leah Koenig showed me the questions that she asks. I think that I maybe would be more extensive next time.
It depends. I mean, chefs have their opinions. You're fitting flavors and techniques that are very individualized. Sometimes there's more room for you to tweak things, and other times you don't necessarily need to. Mm-hmm. And I just want you to know I'm not that organized. You should see my office right now. So for anyone who's thinking about doing collaboration work, what kind of advice can you offer them?
This is always the way I felt as an editor and as a writer. It takes a lot of people to get a book done. And everybody's contribution is important. Your opinion is not the only one. And sometimes you just have to let things go. You have to be able to compromise. If you're doing a book with a chef, you have to learn how to talk to your chef and be assertive about things that are going to work or not work, because they're not in the journalism space. They're not in the book space, and you are. But you also have to be loving about it and be a partner, be like a real partner. Yeah, we also had a photographer, which this is a very unusual thing to come with a photographer. And I've learned from years of working with photographers is just get out of their way. Mm. Don't be afraid, though, to make a suggestion, because the photographers don't always know what is going to happen in the text. They don't always know what's supposed to be going on. So make the suggestion and let them do their work.
Yeah.
That's their art. The cooking is the chef's art. Your art is the writing.
Yeah.
Great advice.
That's well said. Well, congratulations again. And to Scott and Cheyenne.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for coming on and sharing with us. It's really great to talk to you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. The show is edited by Abby Circatella and produced by us. We rely on listener support to keep things going, and you can help by subscribing wherever you get your audio and leaving a review. We also hope you'll sign up for our Substack newsletter, where we share show notes, guest info, sneak peeks at upcoming episodes, and access to our group chat. If you want to buy a book mentioned on the show or want some cool Everything Cookbooks merch, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. And if you're interested in advertising or sponsoring the show, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.